Great to be here. Before I get started, I really want to recognize two things. Just heard Deputy Secretary Sherwood Randall speak. You would find that a lot of my comments are similar to her comments. I'm going to try and stay economic with mine. And I want to engage you all in Q&A at the end. So I'm going to try and keep this a little bit short. I would love to get a question from you folks as to kind of, having listened to this so far, here we are now with the private sector, what questions might you have for us? Second thing, I want to compliment the U.S. Chamber. When you look at the lineup of folks so far, you can see that this is a very important issue. I do work very closely with Dr. Sherwood Randall, and she is tough, she's aggressive, she's smart. She is the kind of partner you want. And I would argue sometimes people get mad about government agencies and everything not being effective. I would say DOE has been terrific and really being led by arguably the best energy secretary America's ever had, Ernie Moniz. So great folks. The other thing I just want to call out is, for all the frustrations we all have about government sometimes, when you think about the folks that are going to follow me, Senators Burr and Feinstein, real bipartisan effort for an important issue to America. They deserve all of our support. When we say that government is intractable and Congress doesn't work, these folks are working the right way, and so we need to support them. For my remarks, got them right here. Let me tell you something. I am relentless in terms of my external engagement on national energy policy. You can Google it up, go to YouTube, and you'll find I've been very consistent in arguing for national energy policy that really does implement all the above and energy innovation and regulatory and legislative reforms, including tax policy. See, one of the things I'm just kind of imbued with the spirit on is that for all the challenges the world is facing right now, whether it's malaise in Europe, or whether it is event risk in Russia or in the Middle East, or in a lack of transparency in China and what impact that has around the worldwide economy, energy is one way that we can play offense. And when I think about my obligation as a CEO of one of the most important energy companies in the world, I'm very struck by the notion that within the four corners of my responsibility, it is to make, move, and sell energy for the benefit of the families we're privileged to serve. And to do so in a way that balances the notions of clean, safe, reliable, and affordable energy. So we want to get that done. I'm also the chair of the Atlanta Federal Reserve Bank, and I serve on the executive committee of the Conference of Chairs at the Big Fed here in D.C. And I'm always fascinated by this confluence of the economy and energy. And what does all this mean? See, I think if we do this right, and I co-authored out of the Business Roundtable the North American Energy Security Plan. And essentially the idea is that we can become a net exporter, not independent, but energy secure. And we can create for America an unassailable advantage to grow the economy, grow jobs, grow personal incomes, and make American lives better. And kind of the punchline I've tried to drive around that concept is the idea that if we can become energy secure, we can improve national security, and we can therefore enable economic security. Now, as I chair this ESCC effort, so all things cyber terrorism, physical terrorism, and actually response to natural disasters. And in fact, interestingly, Tom Kuhn, who leads the Edison Electric Institute organization, great partner, association representing the industry, we turned that on, frankly, Thursday and Friday in response to the potential damage that was going to come with this hurricane that came on. And in fact, Friday we met with, over the phone anyway, we had a meeting with Liz about our preparations, what we were going to do. So this is an active thing. But I think what's interesting is when I think about kind of how we think about cyber terrorism and physical terrorism, those are sometimes indistinguishable. You should think about the threats as being a concerted threat, intertwined. And when I think about energy security breeds national security breeds economic security, I think if we don't get this right, we face a potential existential threat to energy security, to national security, and an existential threat to our economy. This is deadly serious. And I always think about kind of my own industry. When you think about electricity, everybody takes it for granted. The lights are on. And I bet you none of y'all thought about the electrons that are flowing through those lights this morning, right? The lights are on. If the lights go out, you know it. And it's awful. Cyber terrorism is very much the same way. It's happening all around us, all the time. Every microsecond, it's here. And you won't know it until it happens. But there are a host of people that are involved at the federal government, in private industry, that are trying to make sure that they are vigilant as to what's going on and how to prevent and respond to those attacks that inevitably will get through. So what are we doing about it in the electric utility industry right now? So Liz called this out. Actually, the ESCC has been called out as one of the most effective sectors within the Department of Homeland Security. I guess they have 16 different segments of commerce that have an SCC kind of responsibility, and we're one of them. What is remarkable, I think, NIAC, the National Infrastructure Advisory Council that reports to the President, has called the electricity sector out as being one of the most effective. Why? Well, she mentioned there's 21 CEOs that are engaged in that. I am passionate about the notion, especially given what I know now with my security clearance, that this is not an activity, cyber terrorism, physical terrorism, that is able to be delegated. We must, even at the board level, at the C-suite level, take absolute responsibility for knowledge of and response to anything that deals with cyber terrorism, physical terrorism. And therefore, what we've been able to enlist is an unprecedented partnership with the CEOs of our industry, 21 of them, active, daily responsibilities to deal with these important issues. And it's not just investor-owned utilities, it also involves cooperative utilities and municipal utilities across America. And we've kind of organized ourselves around 5 big ideas. I'll give you a little bit more of that. Liz really went into the notions of technology and R&D, and that, frankly, is one of them. The very first one I want to talk about, though, is the idea of strategic planning. It is clear to me that the threats associated with cyber terrorism and physical terrorism are amorphous at best. They always are adapting. They're always trying to find a way in the door, through the keyhole. And what we have to understand is a Maginot-Line approach, a fixed approach to stopping or responding to, will not work. And so the notion is, to borrow from Wayne Gretzky, we've always got to find a way to skate to where the puck will be. And so we really work hard to try and anticipate, using the best of intelligence capability with the best of technology development out of Silicon Valley or in the national labs, where that puck may be and how we should organize ourselves. But it is an enormous challenge, and we will always fail. But we've always got to stay ahead and keep changing. The second thing, I think, really goes to the notion of information sharing and threat analysis. She talked about ISACs. So we have an ISAC. As a CEO, I love people that are never satisfied. I love folks that will say, we're pretty good, I think we're pretty good. But we've got to be better than yesterday, and we've got to have a burning fire in our belly to be better than we are today, tomorrow. And our ISAC is good, needs to be better. She talked about learning best practices. Every sector has an ISAC. We've got to figure out ways to continue to improve our assessment of anomalies. What does that mean? She mentioned CRISP. So imagine this. There is the nomenclature in the intelligence community of blackboards and whiteboards. So when we think about the traffic coming across our servers in the industry, whiteboarding basically means that you know who your friends are. And so this traffic is acceptable. Those are the folks on the whiteboard. We also know there are enemies, and we're always adding to that list. That's the blackboard. And so we know if they're coming across our servers, we know to be vigilant or to prevent them from getting anywhere they don't need to be. Whiteboard, blackboard. But the truth is the vast majority of traffic is somewhere in the middle, in this gray area. And so what CRISP is doing is analyzing all the traffic coming across these servers. We've now covered about 80% of customers of electricity in the United States. And we're able to assess anomalies, to identify something unusual. And very quickly, we've got to figure out what we're going to do about that. Are these good guys? Are they bad guys? Or is it, in fact, just unusual and it's okay? So it's a very tough issue. One of the things Liz just talked about, real-time versus near real-time. And you heard Deputy Secretary Mayorkas also refer to this. I don't know what your vision is of cyber terrorism, but I think when I took this job, I got the idea there was some guy sitting on the 5th floor of a building in Beijing, potentially, typing in his computer and trying to hack in. What we're going to find is that those millions of attacks could someday translate into trillions of attacks as we move from person-directed attacks to machine-to-machine attacks. And I don't know that near real-time is going to cut it. And so we're going to have to navigate our way through the personal protection regimes that we have and cherish so dearly in the United States to taking clear stock of what is an existential threat potential and dealing with it to protect America. Industry government coordination is the third one. You know, look, that deals with just, if you can imagine, we've just had Homeland Security and DOE. There are a host of agencies that deal with, rightfully so, with the best of intentions, cyber terrorism, physical terrorism. We have to, from the private sector, think about ways to harmonize the wealth of information that goes on there and organize ourselves to act on that information. A lot of the information is classified. We've got to figure out a way to turn classified information into actionable information in the private sector. It's a big challenge. She spent a lot of time on R&D. That's item number 4. I won't spend more time. She did a great job going through that. But that is involved really with developing this idea of a capability to skate to where the puck will be. And then one last thing. So I said 5 things. The first one was strategic plan. The second was information sharing, threat analysis. The third was industry government coordination. Fourth was R&D. The fifth, when we think about the response to Hurricane Sandy that came up into the Mid-Atlantic region and the Northeast, one of the things we learned very clearly is we can be perfect, and we're not, but we can be perfect as an industry and still not be effective without understanding that we are inextricably interdependent with other cross sectors. And so we've got to figure out ways, and we've already taken steps before anybody gave us permission to work with other, what I would call lifeline sectors in the United States, oil and gas, and telecom, and transportation, and finance, and others. So we've got to figure out ways to work together to solve these problems, which leads me to kind of my closing comments. There is, NIAC again has made a recommendation to the administration to form a priority group of lifeline sectors to attack these issues. Electricity, finance, transportation, telecom, and water. And what we would do is keep a reasonably small group of people, not the huge numbers of people you're used to seeing in government, where maybe we have 2 CEOs plus some association heads. And what we'll do is harmonize kind of the optimal response to the myriad of information in federal government, figure out ways to create regulatory and legislative initiatives to further enable our response to be better. That's what we're about. We've got to recognize we are good now. We are not nearly where we need to be. And so we're going to work hard to work with government to harmonize the response and get better from a lifeline sector standpoint as a priority. And one of the things we recognize that we always forget when we're here in D.C. is that when you have a problem, There are boots on the ground, people in state and local governments that need to respond. And so we need to knit together federal response, private sector response with state and local governments. Every state and local government has something called a fusion center that deals with information collection and analysis. We need to knit those together so that if an attack in Georgia versus an attack in Kansas versus an attack in Minnesota versus one in New York, that we can knit together that intelligence and act as we start to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Last thing, when I think about kind of organizing federal government, private sector, state and local governments, we also understand that we are not an island. When I do my work at the Fed or in the energy business, I understand this is an international economy. Well, clearly it is an international ecosystem for information technology. And so we've got to understand another element that is so important to our ability to prepare for and respond, and that is, how do we think about international business? How do we think about foreign policy in terms of protecting and responding to cyber and physical terrorism? So it's a very complex issue, but you should be proud that the government is doing the right thing. Private industry is all over this, and we've got to be better. When I finish now, and I'd love to get your questions here in a minute, but I want you to take home the idea that certainly in industry, particularly in energy, nobody should be satisfied with where we are in America today. We have unacceptably slow growth. We have a disaffected workforce. We can be better. Energy is a way to play offense. People are hopeful. So many families in America make tough kitchen table economic decisions every day. They rely on us to set the table to enable them to have a better life. When I think about turning the notion of energy security breeds national security, breeds economic security, and I think about the threat that cyber terrorism and physical terrorism represents to that American hope, these are issues that have too much opportunity and too much threat not to take as seriously as possible. We're doing well. You got the best cards in the world right here. They are insufficient. We need to do better. I'd love to take your questions now. Yes, sir. Just yell and I'll repeat it. Yes. Because you have to.
Well, no, let me finish.
Here, no, wait, no, it's a very legitimate question. Why should we trust the government? Let me tell you something. So one of the things you should have heard, I think Liz said this, is 87%, she said nearly 90, it's 87% of the critical infrastructure, which we've inventoried in America, is owned, controlled, run by private industry. What you have, and look, I guess we can all get frustrated with government from time to time. I'm telling you, my experience with the federal government is that they do a darn good job at trying to assess and think about ways to prevent and respond to these kinds of threats. Now, the challenge is to knit it together, to harmonize what the federal government does with each other, and then to make it actionable to those of us that control critical infrastructure. We have got to get to the point where the threat of a loss is recognized. I guarantee you, if we don't do the right things, we are dealing with, in the lifeline sector, a potential existential threat. We've got to navigate a way through being effective to protect the American way of life with privacy concerns on the individual's part. We're going to have to figure that out. It's not enough to say the government is flawed, I can't do it. Next question. Come on, one more. All right, well, listen. Let me say this in closing. I don't know why you're here, but I want to say thank you. This issue is too important not for us all to join arms and ask the hard questions and think about what's available to us to preserve the American economy, our national security. We have great cards to play. We've got to play them optimally in order to reach our full growth potential and to protect our way of life. These issues are important. We've all got to join arms and support folks that are trying to get to the bottom of this. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.